Okay, we've got our three panelists. So first of all, our colleague, Mr. Han in South Korea, thank you so much for your words of greeting and the party for our 10-year talk of prevention studies. We will definitely postpone it in South Korea or in Germany whenever the COVID-19 situation allows it. But we are very keen on continuing this cooperation and intensify it between the Institute for Applied Preventive Studies and the KIC, the Korean Institute for Criminology, that is taking a leading role in the Asian region in this area. So here at the studio, we will change camera positions for a panel discussion. Stephan Ebmeyer is going to host it. He's a journalist, a reporter, he's a filmmaker and a host, and his expertise is in social media, modern media, digitization. We're very happy we could gain him as an SWR and ARD, a German broadcasting channel worker, as a very competent host. He's also going to introduce the panelists. Stephan, go ahead. Thank you so much, Mr. Marks. The 25th Congress on Crime Prevention. That's an anniversary Congress. The good news is it's happening, just a little different from what we all thought. COVID-19 is turning our daily lives upside down, has been for the past few months, and it probably will do for a few months to come. So for starters, let me summarize the state of affairs here. Over the past few months, we've been having a sort of forced digitization development. So digitization now has entered almost all areas of existence. And it has also had a lot of impact in the negative and in the positive sense. So let me give you some examples where I think a lot of positive changes have happened. What we've seen over the past few months, digital lives, whoever works and communicates in the digital context does not have to face a major risk of infection. And you know, the everyday lives are not very limited. So those people are maybe the winners of this crisis. Obviously, it's a privilege. Not everybody has the privilege to be able to work in the digital space. Only very few people can do this. A lot of jobs can only be done in the physical realm. Not every job can be done digitally from home. But we also see lots of companies and people who used to be against digitization have embraced these new opportunities and have learned, okay, but this helps us maintain business, and it helps us do what we need to do. So personally, I think if in 10 or 20 years we look back to this time, we'll probably see it as a turning point. Now is the age of digitization, and now it really has started. And I think this will not go back, this development. I'm sure some people are still going to be fearful or are going to deny this change, but I think they will probably be the losers of this development. We are seeing a lot of expansion across borders, across language barriers. We can, you know, from the sender to the receiver, the distance has become very short. The internet has been making this possible for years. So, and it's completely open. We're lucky enough to have a completely open, accessible internet. That's not the rule. If you look at China, there's very strict regulations on what's allowed online and what isn't. But here, we're almost always online, at least when the internet allows it. We have lots of digital data, lots of information available at all times, right here in our pockets on our smartphone, that we can access whenever we want, more than any generation before us, which on the one hand is a huge benefit, a huge advantage, but it also has a lot of disadvantages and drawbacks. So we're also seeing this boom on fake news, on and so one of my favorite conspiracy theories is UFO technology 5.0 triggering Corona. In the beginning, I thought that was quite funny and I made fun of it, but we also have to take it seriously because it has real effects. In Great Britain, we saw almost 100 mobile phone masts were burning because so many people got infected by these conspiracy theory news and burned down masts, even close to hospitals, where some people were no longer able to stay in touch with their sick relatives. So dramatic effects. Where do these theories come from? Especially from the right-wing spectrum, political spectrum. The goal is to make people feel insecure, as many as possible, and make them receptible to their own political messages. And we can see in this flood, this overwhelming flood of information, we have a lot of data, but we have problems knowing where do they come from, are they trustworthy? So are we competent enough in the area of media? Obviously not. And this becomes more difficult when data and algorithms are not objective. So I presume that algorithms are objective and not generated to make mistakes. But what if the basis, the foundation is not objective? And we've seen that machines cannot no longer decide better than people, keyword AI. So in the area of filter bubbles, that's also a potential danger when in the social networks, you see more and more of what you've clicked as a user, because the algorithm realizes, okay, this person's interested in this, so I'll give this person more information on this issue. So in the analogous age, we did not see this kind of thing happening. But once again, so who regularly read the daily and weekly magazines and newspapers before? You know, it's not a completely new phenomenon. We can see great danger for kids. We'll talk about this in a second, about mobbing, cyber grooming, and sexting. All these things have become possible also anonymously through digitization. How can we protect young people from this kind of thing? Another issue, main argument is child abuse and child pornography, is to save data and use them for crime prevention or for catching criminals. A lot of people have found that cybercrime has become very easy to commit anonymously. I'm making a documentary on this subject right now. I can't tell you too much about, but apparently it's very easy to get a blackmailing software online and apply it. And apparently millions of people can be blackmailed in this way. And some medium-sized businesses have been paying money due to this kind of crime, because otherwise they would have been unable to move. And we've seen this at the university clinic in Düsseldorf. They were the victim of a hacker, which, you know, he did not try to reach them, but for the first time it had real consequences. A woman died because she could not be operated on in time. So it was postponed by 1 hour and moved to a different clinic, and it was too late. And finally, hate crime, hate speech, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, WhatsApp play a major role. And once again, we've seen this verbal virtual violence does not stay in cyberspace. It can also have real consequences. We've seen it in the Walter Lübcke case in Kassel a year ago. What can become of this? Obviously, we have a tendency, right-wing and extremism and anti-Semitism is growing stronger again. So in other words, we have great dangers we are seeing, and through digitization, they can also be perpetrated. On the other hand, we have great opportunities. So that's what we'd like to talk about today. So I'll finally finish this introduction and ask the guests that know a lot more about this than me. If you want to know more about this, you can see, you can look at our digital report. So let's ask a lawyer who's done webinars when nobody else knew what webinars were in 2013. Tonight she's doing a Prevenar. Lawyer Gesa Stückmann tells us about law, cybermobbing for students, media education for teachers, parents and students. So online, live from Berlin, on Skype, we have Markus Beckedahl. 5 years ago, hi Markus, 5 years ago, he was facing a lawsuit for agitation. Markus Beckedahl, live via Skype from Berlin. We have on my left Johannes Baldorf. Since 2008, he's been looking into conspiracy theories, right-wing extremism, etc. In 2014, he founded the project nonazi.net, and for 2.5 years, he's been working on the same issues on the other side on Facebook. Welcome. And finally, Matthias Heder, at the center, a documentary maker who has made a very good documentary on predictive policing. It's called Pre-Crime. You can look at it at the Institute for Education. We know this from science fiction classics, from Minority Report, etc. Back then, we couldn't assign this to a software, but in his movie, it's about software recognizing crime before it happens. But there's no longer science fiction. It's partly become a reality. Matthias Heder, you've made this film. It sounds great. So just using monitoring software and you can fight crime before it actually happens. Does that actually work in reality? No, not really. Why not? Well, you have to differentiate. There are two approaches. One is a geo program that works with data about theft or robbery data. So a lot of criteria: when did the robbery happen? Where did it happen? How did the robbery happen, and what did they take with them? So you collect these data from the past and use them to calculate using an algorithm that's based on an earthquake algorithm, calculating after shocks. So it names a trigger moment, one robbery, and working from this trigger moment, just like in an earthquake, you can measure waves where probably the next robbery is going to happen over the next few days or weeks. And these software projects are being implemented in different German states, in Germany and in the US. These projects are already normal. So whatever you may think of these projects, whether they work or not, there are scientific studies on them, they work, and others say they don't work. So I don't believe that's the issue. The issue is the programs addressing people, where data about encounters with the police are turned into a point system, and that's used to calculate the endangerment of this person. And then this individual gets allotted a certain number of points, and then if there's a certain number of points, then the police increases the monitoring efforts. about this person. In Chicago, we've seen a subject list, so a strategic list of people, and 400 people. You had a computer program with 400 people in Chicago that fell under this category, that belonged to it. And the theory was that police, together with a social worker, goes to these people and says, look, we are watching you, so please live a proper life. Otherwise, you're getting punished harder than others because we've warned you. And then secondly, there's a social worker that's supposed to educate them, but that's really not what they're doing. So for Black young men, there aren't any education projects or job finding projects. So when my wife and I read about this in the paper over breakfast, we read this article. We thought, no, that's too much. And then we started looking into it, and that's how we arrived at making this documentary. And what has become of this project? Is that actually working? What's the experience? Oh, you know, the US, it's horrible. I mean, there's a federal grant, 400 million, and Chicago takes it together with the scientists. They take it, they develop this project. After 4 years, the 400 million funding is over, and then nobody's paying for it anymore. I think they have 4 or 6 years they've been working with it, and then it turned out that it doesn't work. It's not about prevention. It's not about me saying there's person X and we're protecting this person with these findings that we could gather. No, this person is just being watched, being more strongly watched. That's a huge problem. And then all the data they're working with are data-based, data on police computers. So if you're in Austin, Chicago, and you're Black, you get your first contact when you're 6 years old, and then when you're 7 years old, you keep collecting points throughout your lives, because every contact you have with the police is a point. You have drugs with you, you get 5 points. You have a weapon with you, a knife, a gun, then you get 6 points, and that's how your number of points just climb. And so this one guy had 500 points. You know, that's like a serious criminal. He was on this list because friends of his, or his best friend, was murdered, and that kicks his score up. And then a few times he was caught smoking weed. I mean, everybody smokes weed, you know. He's on this list even though he's never been an actual criminal, and then you never manage to get your name crossed off this list. So in Chicago it failed, but we can see it coming over here. In your documentary, you named the example of Bavaria, which is also using this actively. No, not in connection with people, no, but the same technology. Yes, technology is being used against robberies. So there are studies from Max Planck Institute from 2018 that say this kind of that have examined this kind of program in Stuttgart. In one district, a police district worked with it, another one didn't, and they saw that the crime rate for robbery between 15 and 16 went down by almost 23%. But it happened in the district that worked with PrEP-Poll, and also in the other district that did traditional police work. So crime is a highly complex social issue that you cannot pinpoint so easily with this type of technology. You cannot seriously predict it with this type of technology. I think it's nonsense. It's based more on thoughts like, we trust technology. We all trust technology. Technology is good. The second thing is, over the past 20 years, we've seen systematic downsizing in the police, and at the same time, the state has to promise safety and security. So if I want to use technology, yes, of course, I can fulfill this demand to assure safety. We believe technology can help us solve social problems based on social issues, and I believe that that's the mistake we're making.
Gesprochen wurde,
like traditional police work. So as a policeman, a police person, maybe I should have a gut feeling about where robberies are going to happen. Yes, you know, you hit your police car, then you get a PDF giving you a certain district of your town with little red boxes, and our models have shown that these areas are likely to get robberies. So let's get lots of police out there into this district, hoping that if we have a strong police presence, there will be less crime happening, less cars being stolen, less robbery, fewer robberies. Obviously, that makes sense. If there's more police presence, then nobody's going to steal a car, but you don't know what happens in the other parts of town during that time. So it's a question of resources. We have fewer resources, manpower-wise, and so we have to use them more efficiently, which we're trying to do using technology. So if you hear that, Stückmann, a computer program that's supposed to prevent crime, does that remind you of a how do you evaluate this? I believe that, as you said, we're trying to use technology to replace manpower, and I believe that cannot work. Technology is limited, it can be influenced, it can be changed, altered. If we rely on it 100%, then we are giving up our intelligence, and I would not want to rely on that. Unfortunately, I can't see that. Okay, I can see Markus Beckedahl. How do you evaluate this? What do you think? Software that's supposed to prevent crime in advance, is that really a good idea? So I don't think it's a very good idea. Matthias already explained it very well and thoroughly, and I completely support him in that. Why it's not such a cool idea. Stückmann mentioned it too. By using technology, you know, money is missing in using people power, and people are often the problem, or you know, missing staff shortages are often the problem in law enforcement. And I would wish for us to be less reliant on such technologies that suggest you could just easily, you know, push a button and prevent crime. It's an illusion, especially perpetrated by the makers and their marketing brochures vis-a-vis non-technology competent policemen. I'd like to buy such software to feel safe, you know, to get voters and to make their boss, maybe our voters, feel safer. Okay, Matthias, let me ask you again. So fundamentally, maybe there is a way of using this technology in a good way. Do you see any opportunities of using it in a good way that would make sense? No, not at all. I believe we should scrap it. And it is being scrapped. Los Angeles had the same program and they abolished it. Chicago, as a hotspot of crime in the US, abolished it. Because they said after 3 years they realized 70% of people on our list are dead. So the program is right. But what does it mean? Prevention means I'm preventing these people getting harmed or dying. So, and that's the program's not doing that. They're being scrapped, and we should scrap them. Give the money to properly organized social work, black minorities, especially in Austin in this case, but nobody's doing that. Nobody's actually interested in solving the problem. My impression is all these programs are trying to make individuals insecure. If you're a black person and the police visits you and they don't take you to prison, then you're cooperating with the police. Otherwise, you'd be in prison. So the police is causing these rifts in their social relationships with the goal of driving them out. So whatever is identified, whoever is identified as somebody causing trouble, they want this person to just go away. to disappear. In Florida, there's a project with a sheriff. Sheriffs have a great power in the US, and this guy has introduced exactly such a system. Every contact with the police is documented. It's documented who's in your car when you know, there's a traffic control. All that is input into a point system, and if people have a high score, then they're systematically molested by the police until they leave, because it's unbearable to see a policeman every third day hassling you. You can no longer get cheap housing, community supported housing, because you're on this list with a high score. And that's the police publicly communicates this. Yes, we want these people to go, these troublemakers, and that's what these programs are used for, to keep a lid on ethnic unrest in the States, definitely. I just said we are seeing police authorities, investigators, prosecutors, etc., developing an interest in data storage to better. So this data storage is not about storing content of communication, but who has communicated with whom, when, where, and for how long. So probably if you're not a criminal, you wouldn't mind. The problem is that that they are documenting this for every citizen, and for that reason in 2014 and 2016 we've seen sentences against this happening, but there's still hopes of using this. Markus Beckedahl in Berlin, I'd like to ask you, this preventive data storage, is that actually effective? Would we be able to prevent crime with that? I'm skeptical. So this preventive data storage, we had it between 2008 and 2010. Before it was declared illegal. So before that, for 6 months, everything was stored about where we were with our mobile phones and who we talked to, etc. Max Planck Institute did a study on this, which and it could not see any influence on crime prevention. So there's no proof of this functioning or this having any positive effect. Then it was reintroduced and then it was stopped again because it's a challenge to basically treat the entire population as suspects and save data on where we are and what we do with our mobile phones, even though some authorities may benefit from it. On the other hand, we should ask ourselves, in the analogous world, if somebody would document who do we meet when we go shopping, who did we meet for coffee, I think a lot of people would say, would suddenly say, definitely not. You know, it's not none of the authorities' business who I meet for coffee. But basically, it's the same thing. It's telling people. It's telling the authorities about your location. We always carry our mobile phones with us. And if we do, then our providers save our data, location data. And with statistical evaluation, if they know where you were yesterday, then they can obviously predict more exactly where we are going tomorrow before we've even thought about that. And that's a great danger. And the other danger about saving these data is that those who want to commit criminal acts know how to get out of this system. And all of us who are not planning to do anything criminal, we are being documented and our data are going to be collected, which basically breaches our basic rights. Do you have a suggestion of how to prevent crime more effectively? would like if we had more digital competence among our authorities, policemen, etc. That would be good. We have a lot of legal procedures, a lot of lawsuits. For example, the terrorists in Halle, the responsible policemen did not make such a competent impression, and I think that's a failure. We haven't given policemen enough resources in the area of staff, but also hardware, software, and education on how to effectively use this to do their job better. And I suspect, it's a gut feeling, that the preventive data storage is always a good distraction technique for ministers of the interior, because when they ask for this, they can divert attention from their own shortcomings. So, but usually we just see that if we'd had more staff, then we could have done better work. What do you say as a lawyer, Ms. Stückmann? Can you name cases where you can say, if I'd had more data, I could have maybe worked better? I could have helped my client better? Well, usually it's victims seeking my help. I see the problem that basic rights are being breached. Sure, if you go to a supermarket and you're being monitored, it's not nice. On the other hand, I see cases where victims, where we try by through a lawsuit to find out who it was, like mobbing this person online, etc. On Instagram, for example, we have confession sites. So if you want to accuse somebody, starting a lawsuit, there's an app, and you can get anonymous questions. So in the cases I've had, the police got active very quickly, and on telling them they got data, and then the next step, the provider where the data were posted from the IP address had to provide information, and they didn't. They said, sorry, but we're not allowed to provide data, and now the data have been deleted. And that's a huge problem for victims. I cannot help them. I cannot do anything. My hands are bound. I just have to say sorry. The person is just going to get away with it. So, there are two sides to this issue. I understand authorities asking for preventive data storage, not just to divert attention from shortcomings, but because it's actually important and we actually need it to persecute crime. So wouldn't it be good to ask to start with prevention measures as early as possible, with social work inside the families, etc., because those are the people that tend to become criminals. Yes, we have to start very early with the parents that give their kids a smartphone in primary school, to tell them what they're actually doing. A smartphone is technology for adults, and now you see primary students running around with them. So we have to educate parents. That's one issue. How can we reach parents? And we can see this at schools. The people that are taking care of their kids come to these events, but the other parents don't even come. Then we have to approach students directly. My part is a legal part. I educate them about the legal issues, that laws apply in this area, I tell them, and they don't start applying when you're 18. You have to take responsibility now at school. It's a legally regulated space. And also teachers, there's great shortages. Teachers don't know much about what their students are doing, what's going on, what apps are out there, and what procedures. So all groups really have to be educated. So what's the situation in schools? During COVID-19, we've seen digital learning partly working, born out of need, obviously. How do you perceive this? Digital media in students' eyes, are they perceived, or do you perceive this as a danger, or do you see positive sides? There's always two sides. There's abuse, which is always possible, but a lot of people are responsibly using these tools and doing great things. And you know, in physics, you Google something about physics. My daughter was very surprised after COVID-19. She went back to school. The young teacher said, "Scan this QR code," and she was like, "What? You don't want me to open a book?" So there's great sides to this issue. You can really use this to make your lessons interesting. Global knowledge, you can tap into that and get it into the classroom. So obviously it always has two sides. Yes, but let's talk about the other side. What dangers do you see, and what do you educate people about? So it started in 2007. This is the 14th year I'm doing the schoolwork. In 2007, the first case of cyber mobbing. Nobody knows this anymore. So back then I worked on this issue as a lawyer, and then the school asked me to educate students about it. So then it kept developing. In 2007 we didn't have smartphones yet. Everything was taking place on computers. Then smartphones came. I think in 2007 we saw the first iPhone, then it was Facebook, and students were using Facebook. Now that's all over again. So students are not using Facebook anymore. That's for us, older people. There's Instagram, Telegram, Snapchat, TikTok, etc. And there's cyber mobbing is one thing. There's sexting, that's a huge issue, where students are posting naked photographs or videos to their friends or to somebody they like, maybe, and then they get spread around. There's cyber grooming, not just, you know, it's always named in the connection with games, but the cyber grooming, addressing, you know, adults addressing kids, also happens through Instagram, through WhatsApp. My daughter got a message on WhatsApp from an unknown person, and luckily they approached me. A lot of people don't go to their parents with this, and as parents we have no idea who our kids are communicating with. There's strangers getting in touch with them and parents have no idea. 15-year-old sent a dick pic, so a picture of his erect penis, to an 11-year-old, and the mother was absolutely speechless. She had no idea that her daughter was in touch with this boy. Why didn't she know? Because the WhatsApp chat was archived, and obviously there were some agreements between them where her daughter took out the chat and archived it with this boy, so the mom had no idea. So there are so many possibilities to abuse these formats, you know, to abuse minors, but also to abuse these media. There's a huge range. What would you like to see to get better prevention measures in place? What would be concrete ideas? We have to educate people, raise awareness. And that's what I've been doing since 2013 through webinars. I'm trying to do a live stream, which in 2013 was voodoo to schools. You know, they were like, what is that? So, you know, I do a live stream in the classroom, and I'm telling them about reality, about what I see in my work. I tell students about it, what consequences it has. It's interactive, so not a video of me, you know, they're live. Students can ask me questions, and we need more of this. Also more networking. That's what I like to advocate. One father told me, I'd like to do these webinars in Cuxhaven at my son's school. And the Parents' Council, somebody told me, but the police is doing something. I was like, so what? The police is doing it their way, I'm doing it my way. Let's do it together. Because you can always approach this from different angles, and the more angles kids see, I think the more they learn about it. So we have to network, we have to work together, all the players have to work together. on this. That's what we need. Early prevention work, raising awareness and collaboration. And we also have somebody who represents Facebook. Do you believe that the platforms have to adjust something? You can filter out dick pics. Is there anything that you would like to see, or what you think things would improve? Well, I mean, a violent video, how can that enter a WhatsApp group? You know, on TikTok, somebody took their own lives, and the video was on TikTok and on Instagram, where parents say, how can that be? It should not happen. It should not be shown. I don't know. I'm not a technology expert. I don't know if it would actually be possible, because there's such huge amounts of content out there that do not belong there. I mean, TikTok is actually, you know, from 13 years of age, you can use it. I don't know whether it's actually possible to filter out such content. That's a big question. So I think it's important that parents know these contents are out there and that they can help their kids. We cannot actually just tell them not to do things. It doesn't work that way. You know, we don't, we take our kids' hand when they go out there into traffic. But the problem is parents have no idea what they have to tell their kids. So that's the problem. I said in the beginning, we're also seeing a boom in fake news and conspiracy theories. Let's ask our Facebook man, who's been working in this area for a long time. Facebook also has a sort of two-sided role. Obviously, one side of the business model is that you post things, you know, it's made for exchange. Does Facebook make efforts to get this problem under control? Short answer is yes. Surprise, surprise. Now it's the but part, the longer answer. So obviously it's not you're doing this and that and then the problem is solved. But we're not talking about a problem that's a digital problem or a Facebook problem. It's a problem rooted in society. You said initially it's never been as bad. I would actually say no, in the 90s it was even worse. And never mind about conspiracy theories, but it's a phenomenon that we've been seeing since the beginning of the Enlightenment age, and it's very difficult every time again. And digital communication contributes to some things and requires us to think about, to rethink these issues. On the other hand, let me say 50 years, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years ago, we did not have solutions against conspiracy theories as society. We still have no solutions to the subject today. That makes it difficult. But if we look at crises, they make conspiracy theories grow. And we have a crisis right now. We have a broad spectrum of what we generally sum up in our public discourse as fake news and conspiracy theories. At the beginning of the crisis, it was a lot about people saying, do you drink hot water? Do you drink bleach? And these absurdities. And, you know, like, then you won't get infected. You won't get corona. And the longer the pandemic has lasted, the more we're seeing a shift towards it not being about what happens to the individual, how do I get sick, how can I protect myself, but it shifts towards what's the big plan behind it, and then it moves over to the area of conspiracy theories. So let's look at fake news. So I think a lot of independent bodies are saying that too. We've reacted to it quite well. And it's always this cat and mouse sort of game. You always have to see whether you're going to catch the mouse. We have removed a lot of content, and especially when it comes to what are real facts and what's fake. In the entire industry, we basically have the biggest network with fact checks and global that look into these contents independently, so we remain credible and trustworthy. So if a content has been verified, then you create an overlay saying, okay, we've verified this and we've looked into this and we found out this and that. So you know, whatever has been fake about it or partly wrong, there will be a warning shown to everybody who sees this. And finally, this led to 95% of people who decided, based on this warning, okay, I don't want to interact with this anymore, I'm not going to share this, etc. So, and we're talking about millions of contributions, millions of postings, I think 50 million in April worldwide, and still the problem is still there after that. So as I said, you know, it's a cat and mouse problem. The other challenge, and I'll be done, is the area of conspiracy theories. You cannot just check the facts, because obviously usually they are lacking any real foundations mostly, but they're still building on something that's sort of semi-true. You cannot really investigate or look into that. So it's more about faith. It's sort of a religious issue, and that makes it very difficult, because then you have to think about okay, what's wrong and what's right, how do you deal with this. Also in this area we are moving ahead. As we've heard earlier, at the end of the day, our discussion is often, especially when it comes to requests from politics, what contents are removed, how quickly. And the question I'm asking myself is, in how far, especially with conspiracy theories, in how far does the removal of content actually aid the solution of the problem? I used to work for StudiVZ, which we heard about, and I had my first experiences about how to deal with conspiracy theories. And you could see, if you removed a group, thinking, okay, I've removed the hotspot, on a different blog, independent of this network, you see an article that says this group was removed because who does it belong to, who's behind it, etc., etc. And we were only deleted because we were telling the truth. So that means we're on the right path. So in the end, this removal has probably led to increasing the problem. So maybe some people leave it, others turn more radical. And this is the area we have to discuss. This is where we have to see not only what does one platform do, or what do you do in law enforcement, but how can we bring all these sides together. I think that's one of the greatest challenges we're facing over the next few years. Thank you so much. I wanted to let you talk and give us a complete picture. Obviously, that's true. 100 years ago with the Spanish flu, we saw that masks were being doubted as effective measures, etc. The difference is that potentially with a social network, I'm not just reaching my local circle of friends and acquaintances, but if I'm good at it, I can reach hundreds of thousands or even millions of people at once. So I would like to ask Markus Beckedahl again. Mr. Baldauf said Facebook is doing a good job. Is that enough, what Facebook is doing?
Gelächter, okay.
Laughter, okay. Well, Mr. Baldauf did a good job. He really said Facebook was not all responsible. I think he belittled Facebook's, he said Facebook was not responsible. But I think through its mechanisms, Facebook is actually giving preference to a lot of contents to do with conspiracy theory, etc. And that's what we're angry about. Facebook is basically a commercial engine, trying to keep us users on the platform as long as possible, to keep our attention and to give us targeted commercials and selling it to people. And these mechanisms have contributed to spreading these conspiracy theories and fake news, also to WhatsApp, etc. Facebook took much too long to react to it. I have to admit it's a complex issue, but when you deal with conspiracy tweets by US President Donald Trump, I think Facebook hesitated much too long before it dared to add warnings to obvious lies. To add warnings to Donald Trump's warnings. Other platforms were much faster. For example, Twitter intervened much earlier and did a better job dealing with it than Facebook. And also conspiracy groups, that there are other examples. Reddit is one of the biggest networks, which most people don't know. They did very well sort of deleting QAnon conspiracy groups, etc., etc. They intervened at a much earlier stage than Facebook, which is reacting now, but much too late. And now you can no longer reverse this or get rid of the ghost you've helped create. Thank you for your evaluation, Mr. Beckedahl. So I would like to use the last few minutes to thank everybody for the interesting discussion. So final round. So each of you, and also of our live guests from Berlin, is allowed to found a Facebook group with one or several participants in this discussion. What's the group called? Who do you invite? And what is your goal? Who wants to start? So sorry, I didn't catch that. So one more time. So please found a Facebook group. I don't want to found a Facebook group. Okay, fair enough. Not with somebody who's sitting here, let's work together and let's start something. No, honestly, this kind of social networks like Facebook, I think they should be scrapped. They should be replaced with a socially organized communication on a platform that's not ruled by algorithms and translates our attention into profits. So I think that's a form that a good way of using digital technology. So conspiracy theories have always been around, and technology is not the root of that. It just makes these things faster and makes them travel faster through society, and following the motivation of profit. So all the old internet pioneers, everybody who in the 90s was very optimistic about this, that's what we discussed on a tech-lash. You have to step back from it. You have to find a different kind of decentralization. That's not going to happen, but if I was going to found a Facebook group, I would propagate this. That's a nice idea. Ms. Stückmann, who would you invite? I would invite representative of school social workers, and then I would invite representatives of the ministries of education. Sorry, I'm not inviting anybody from this panel, but those are the people I think about, just so that we can address the subject that you addressed earlier, school social work and social work, and address this focus, social ministries, ministries of education, so we can make it clear that they need to take on more responsibility in this area, because parents are not doing what they should be doing anymore, and primary students and also vocational school students need support from school social workers, and there's not enough focus on it. Whenever a child has suffered, people start crying, but we need more of that. Markus Beckedahl, who would you invite? I'd probably do a parallel group to Ms. Stückmann's group, and stay in touch with Ms. Stückmann. I think focusing on children and young people is not the right approach. I think it's important, and we haven't done enough in making young people competent on the internet, but we forget that 90% of the population no longer go to school, and a lot of negative effects like hatred, conspiracy theories, etc. If you look at these, you often feel like white men above 50 should learn more about media competence. There should be more prevention done in this segment. Tell them, what does it mean? What responsibilities and ethical questions do you have to be aware of, so that our young people grow up in a more positive environment, also online. And Johannes Beide? Who do you invite? I would totally put my name under Mr. Beckedahl's group. I would just join his group, I think. The other question is whether you'd be accepted. But the political education in combination with media education, that would be my focus. Thank you so much, Gesa Stückmann, Anne Seda, and Mr. Baldorf and Mr. Beckedahl. We'll take a break now, and afterwards we can answer some questions from the audience. Thank you very much.